As the second Trump administration unfolds, the geopolitical landscape is becoming increasingly tumultuous, particularly in the context of U.S. China relations. Recent developments have sparked a wave of concern and speculation in Beijing as the Chinese government grapples with a series of unpredictable actions from Washington amid escalating tensions. On March 4, Lin Jian, spokesperson for the Chinese Foreign Ministry, issued a pointed statement in response to President Trump's increase of tariffs on Chinese imports. If war is what the U.S. wants, be it a tariff war, a trade war, or any other type of war, we're ready to fight till the end, Lin declared, an indication of the serious tone with which China views the current situation. This rhetoric came shortly after Trump imposed an additional 10% tariff, further straining trade relations between the two nations. In retaliation, China implemented its own tariffs on a range of U.S. agricultural goods, including soybeans and chickens, signaling a tit-for-tat escalation that has become characteristic of the U.S. China trade dynamic. Amidst this backdrop, tensions intensified, with reports from the New York Times suggesting that the Pentagon was preparing to brief prominent business figures, including Elon Musk, on military strategies in the event of a conflict with China. The U.S. administration quickly denied these claims, with Trump asserting, "We don't want a potential war with China," and emphasizing the nation's military preparedness. However, the mere suggestion of these briefings has raised alarms in Beijing, as it highlights the increasing militarization of rhetoric surrounding U.S.-China relations. In parallel to these tensions, Chinese President Xi Jinping has been actively engaging with multinational companies, advocating for stable U.S.-China relations based on mutual respect and cooperation. During a recent meeting with executives from firms such as AstraZeneca and FedEx, Xi emphasized that the economic relationship between China and the U.S. should be mutually beneficial and must be resolved through dialogue. This stance reflects China's desire to stabilize its economic interactions while acknowledging the growing hostilities. Yanyang Cheng, a research scholar at Yale Law School, noted that the Chinese leadership is bracing for ongoing hostilities regardless of U.S. electoral outcomes. The Chinese government is prepared for a hostile U.S.-China relationship, Cheng stated, underscoring the need for China to adopt a tough stance both for domestic legitimacy and geopolitical positioning. The strategic competition between the two nations has become a fundamental element of U.S.-China relations, prompting Beijing to seek new alliances and bolster domestic consumption as a countermeasure to external pressures. In recent discussions, analysts have pointed out that despite the adversarial nature of U.S.-China relations, there is significant interdependence between the two economies. A potential economic slowdown in the U.S., as anticipated by many experts, could adversely impact China as well, complicating the narrative that Beijing may benefit from U.S. instability. Julian Goertz, a former senior director for China and Taiwan affairs at the White House National Security Council, emphasized that a slowdown in the U.S. economy would have negative effects on the Chinese economy. The unfolding chaos in Washington has led to a mixed response from China. While some segments of the Chinese public express a sense of schadenfreude regarding the turmoil in U.S. politics, Cheng cautioned that economic recessions or institutional breakdowns in the U.S. are not necessarily advantageous for Beijing. The Chinese leadership is cautious. The current instability creates opportunities, but it also poses significant risks, she remarked. As the Trump administration continues to navigate a complex web of domestic and foreign policy challenges, the implications for U.S.-China relations remain unpredictable. The volatility of the current U.S. leadership, characterized by impulsive decision-making and a lack of diplomatic restraint, raises concerns for the Chinese government, which prefers stability and control. Cheng noted that the Chinese leadership has experience dealing with unpredictable leaders, yet the current climate presents a unique set of challenges. Looking ahead, the coming months will be crucial in determining how these geopolitical tensions evolve. With Trump's unpredictable leadership style, the potential for negotiations with China remains uncertain. The stakes are high, as both nations seek to balance their interests while navigating the choppy waters of international relations. As the world watches this intricate dance between two global superpowers, the need for constructive dialogue and cooperative engagement has never been more pressing. The future of U.S. China relations hangs in the balance with both opportunity and peril lurking in the shadows. As the United States prepares for a potential escalation in its trade war with China, the stakes have never been higher. With President Donald Trump's deadline for a comprehensive review of trade relations with China looming, analysts are bracing for what could be a significant shift in economic policy. The implications of Trump's America First trade strategy are reverberating not just across the Pacific but through global markets. In a recent report, Barclays highlighted that the possible new tariffs on Chinese goods could be too large to absorb, too conspicuous to dodge. This stark warning comes as China finds itself with fewer options to mitigate the fallout compared to the earlier stages of the trade conflict. During Trump's first term, Chinese manufacturers managed to navigate the tariffs by relocating supply chains and compressing profit margins. However, as Barclays notes, the current economic landscape offers much less scope to divert trade. With U.S. exports to China valued at approximately $525 billion in 2024, a significant tariff increase could devastate sectors already reeling from thin profit margins. Tariffs will increasingly take their toll on profits, wiping out the narrow margins in those industries that are particularly exposed to U.S. tariffs, the report stated. Trump's administration has tasked Trade, Commerce, and Treasury officials with reviewing the Phase 1 agreement reached in 2020 and determining whether China has fulfilled its commitments. As the prospect of Liberation Day approaches, a symbolic date in Trump's trade policy meant to signify freedom from perceived Chinese economic unfairness, Beijing's policymakers are left anxiously awaiting the outcome. Simultaneously, the trade tensions are pushing other Southeast Asian nations, particularly Vietnam, into a precarious yet opportunistic position. Vietnam has benefited from the U.S.-China trade turmoil, emerging as a favored destination for manufacturers seeking to sidestep tariffs. Major companies like Apple, Samsung, and Intel have significantly expanded their operations in Vietnam since the onset of the trade conflict. The country's exports to the U.S. have nearly tripled since 2017, reaching approximately $140 billion in 2024. However, Vietnam's relationship with China complicates its newfound economic role, with China being Vietnam's largest supplier. Providing about half of all manufacturing inputs, there are growing concerns that the U.S. may scrutinize Vietnam for potential tariff circumvention. Despite research dispelling systematic tariff evasion allegations, the perception alone could make Vietnam vulnerable to U.S. retaliatory measures. Hanoi is attempting to navigate these complex waters with a mix of economic pragmatism and diplomatic strategy. It has engaged actively with the Trump administration, showcasing goodwill through significant commercial transactions such as a $1.5 billion commitment from the Trump Organization to develop a golf complex in Vietnam. This type of economic engagement is seen as crucial for maintaining favorable relations with Washington while avoiding punitive tariffs. As the Trump administration continues to redefine U.S.-China relations, the uncertainty surrounding its trade policies looms large over global markets. While the U.S. economy may be insulated from some of the immediate impacts of tariffs suggested by ANZ Research's recent analysis that indicated the exaggerated effects of these tariffs, China's challenges are escalating. With domestic retail sales dwarfing export revenues, the Chinese economy faces stagnation, primarily driven by a lack of domestic demand. In this intricate geopolitical landscape, both nations are poised for a tense standoff that may redefine their economic futures. The outcomes of these deliberations and the broader implications for global trade dynamics remain uncertain, but one thing is clear: the repercussions of U.S.-China relations will be felt far beyond their borders. As the world watches closely, the next steps taken by both administrations will be critical in shaping the future of international trade and economic cooperation. In a significant escalation of military tensions in the Asia-Pacific region, China has initiated large-scale military drills around Taiwan, signaling its ongoing commitment to assert control over the self-governing island. The exercises, which involve naval, aerial, and missile forces, come as a direct response to remarks made by Taiwan's President Lai Ching-te, who referred to China as a foreign hostile force and outlined measures to combat Chinese influence and espionage. This provocative maneuver underscores the fragile balance of power in the area and highlights the potential for conflict, particularly in light of the United States' evolving military partnerships. The People's Liberation Army (PLA) announced on April 1, 2025 that its exercises would simulate operations aimed at seizing overall control of the Taiwan Strait, a critical maritime passage. Senior Colonel Shuri, a spokesperson for the Eastern Theater Command, emphasized that these drills serve as a severe warning against any Taiwanese aspirations for formal independence. The drills, which reportedly involved the aircraft carrier Shandong and a considerable array of military assets, took place without prior notice, raising alarms not only in Taiwan but also among international observers. Taiwan's Ministry of National Defense reported tracking 71 Chinese aircraft and 21 naval vessels in the vicinity of the island during the exercises. This level of military activity reflects a pattern of increasing assertiveness from Beijing, which has been dispatching military assets regularly into Taiwan's air defense identification zone. Such actions have heightened fears of a potential surprise attack under the guise of military exercises, prompting Taiwan to establish a central response group to monitor the situation closely. The backdrop to these military maneuvers includes heightened U.S. engagement in the region, particularly through bolstered defense ties with Japan. U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth recently visited Tokyo, where he reaffirmed America's commitment to countering Chinese military aggression. Hegseth described Japan as an indispensable partner in this endeavor, stressing the urgency of enhancing military capabilities in light of China's growing territorial assertiveness. This move is seen as a strategic response to China's recent military activities, which have included drills near Australia and New Zealand without prior notification to commercial air traffic. Analysts suggest that while the Chinese military exercises are expressly aimed at intimidating Taiwan, they also carry an implicit message directed at Washington. By showcasing military might, China seeks to undermine U.S. support for Taiwan and portray President Li's administration as a destabilizing force in the region. The rhetoric from Chinese officials has been pointed, with statements condemning Li's pro-independence stance and characterizing him in derogatory terms, further illustrating the heightened animosity between the two sides. Despite the aggressive posturing, experts argue that China's leadership, particularly under President Xi Jinping, may be cautious about escalating tensions to the point of open conflict. The ongoing trade disputes with the United States, including significant tariffs imposed by the Trump administration, create a complex backdrop in which China must navigate its military ambitions without appearing weak or overly aggressive. As tensions continue to simmer, the situation remains fluid, with the potential for future developments that could reshape the security landscape in the Indo-Pacific. Analysts will be watching closely for how both Taiwan and the U.S. respond to China's military maneuvers, as well as any shifts in policy from the Trump administration that could influence the balance of power in this critical region. The stakes are high, and the implications of these military exercises extend far beyond the waters surrounding Taiwan, affecting regional stability and international relations.